Hello, my name is Bob Ramsey, and welcome to the Ultimate Coaching Formula. The purpose of this audio is to present my original coaching system, and I'm going to take the next hour to talk you through its structure. Learn these principles of coaching, and you can use them as a leader to reap the rewards of a more engaged, equipped, and influential workforce. So now let's ask the first question. How does corporate coaching relate to you? I don't know. Let's find out. Are you worried about the level of talent on your team? If so, I wouldn't blame you. This economy is squeezing the labor market from both sides. On one hand, there are fewer highly qualified people than there used to be, and those that exist are demanding higher and higher salaries. But money doesn't buy loyalty, and as of 2016, people are more likely than ever to switch employers within the next 3 years. But on the other hand, the skills required in the workplace are expanding. In December of 2015, I surveyed a group of CEOs about their hiring practices, and 83% said they were looking for a broader range of skills today from their employees than they did in the past. So there are fewer people available to do increasingly demanding work. Do you want to attract and retain the talent your business requires? Do you want to increase the skill set of your current employees so they can grow into new roles? Or maybe you're worried that your workers aren't living up to their full potential. It's actually shocking when you look at the statistics. According to research by the Gallup organization, fully 50% of employees are not engaged at work. Worse yet, of that 50%, 20% are actively disengaged at work. That means 20%, 1 in 5 of your workers are actively disengaged and resisting your corporate vision. Doesn't that send shivers up your spine? Maybe coaching has piqued your interest because you want to re-engage your workforce, increasing your productivity. This can actually save you a lot of money. Think about it. You can hire one new person and pay all their salary and benefits, or you can make 10 people 10% more effective. And that adds up to the productivity of a whole new person. And it's way cheaper. Or maybe you're worried that you aren't fully utilizing your people's strengths. As a leader, you're kind of like a chef. Your job is to take a group of people, throw in some equipment and materials, light a fire underneath them, and produce results. But unlike salt, which always has the same taste, each person you manage has a completely different skill set. Some people have a strength in numbers and other people have a strength in people. But if as a leader you don't know that, then you might put people in the wrong roles or communicate to them in a way that demotivates them. This requires individual attention in a way that some people might call coaching. But you don't care what it's called. You just want a way to determine who is and who isn't leadership potential. The truth is, I don't really know what your current problems are. But I can tell you one thing with absolute confidence. The principles of coaching can help solve every one of the problems I just mentioned. With coaching, you can attract, retain, develop, and groom your highest potential people. You can contain the problem employees and bring them back in line. And you can re-engage the average worker, making him perform like a star. How do I know this? I've seen it happen firsthand. For the past decade, I've been a professional coach for executives and high-level employees. I've coached executives, CEOs, rising stars, and problem employees in industries such as energy, manufacturing, healthcare, technology, and government contracting. I've been brought in to help retain a key employee who's being heavily recruited by another firm, and she stayed. I've been brought in to help resolve a regional manager deal with a major problem in his dysfunctional team, and he solved it. And I've been called in to help an owner's son learn the skills necessary to someday run the company, and he's almost ready to take over. And trust me, I've had hundreds more stories like this. The truth is, I'm passionate about coaching because I've seen the impact it can have. I know it works, and I've talked to the best CEOs around the country who know it too. So if you have any interest in corporate coaching, then you must be pretty smart, because that puts you in the same company with the best CEOs in the country. Actually, let's take a closer look at this point, because I think it's often misunderstood. Some people have the idea that it's the loser companies that bring in coaches, that it's somehow an admission of defeat or a waste of money. But I can tell you from years of experience that this is dead wrong. In fact, it's the complete opposite, and everybody in the coaching industry knows it. It's always the best, the most well-run companies that talk about training and coaching their people. They might not be the biggest or the most established, but they are the most forward-thinking, ambitious, and intelligent companies. If you want to see a company that doesn't believe in coaching, just drive across the railroad tracks. You'll see a run-down, stubborn, closed-minded organization that's just a shadow of its former glory. They don't even talk about growth anymore. They're just trying to prolong the decline. It's not rocket science. One company invests in its people, and another company thinks it's a waste of money. Who do you think is going to be more successful? Think of this in terms of athletics. Maybe names like some famous athletes you know. Maybe names like Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, Derek Jeter come to mind. These are extremely talented athletes. But notice something else. They all had extremely talented coaches. In our examples, Phil Jackson, Bill Belichick, Joe Torre. Think about that. Not even Michael Jordan was too good for a coach. In fact, he needed a coach to help bring out his best. But some basketball players do think they're too good for a coach. And do you know who they are? Well, neither do I, because they never became stars. We've never heard of them because they never performed well enough to reach the top of their field. And this is not just true for athletics. High performers in every field have employed coaches, including Bill Clinton, Nelson Mandela, Larry King, and Diane Sawyer. And here's what we need to realize. The same principle applies in business. If you want your people to perform at their highest levels, then they need to be coached. And the best organizations are those that invest in the performance of their people. Okay, let's take a step back for a moment. It's true that I'm a professional coach and I'm available to coach your people. But that is not what this is about. This is not a sales pitch. And I'm not going to waste your time by trying to pressure you to buy something. This is way more than that. In this audio, I'm presenting my signature coaching system that I've developed over the past 10 years. While Tom Brady was mastering football and Larry King was mastering broadcasting, I was mastering the art of coaching. And I've created the ultimate coaching formula that is far better than anything else on the market. And in this audio, I'm sharing the principles that make this system so effective. This means that you can take my techniques and use them tomorrow to be a better leader for your own people. And that's okay. That's what I want you to do. If you start leading your people with these principles, then you, your company, and the economy as a whole will be better. And in that way, I benefit. But I also know there are some leaders that are just too busy to properly coach their people. They have the skill, they have the desire, and they just don't have the time. And in these circumstances, I'm available to help and I'll do a great job. But now that I've said that once, I'm done. From here on, the whole focus will be on teaching you the skills of coaching so that you can be a better, more effective leader. I'm going to present my system with the assumption that you're going to incorporate some of the ideas to better lead your people. So think of this audio as a leadership training program for that aspect of leadership that resembles coaching. And if you follow these principles, then you'll achieve the same kind of influence that I've produced over the years by coaching. So let's take a quick peek ahead where we're going. In this program, you're going to learn the difference between being a sage on the stage and a guide on the side. You're going to learn the simple technique that increases the amount that people exercise by 78%, even 18 months later. You're going to learn the difference between the words simple and easy, and how they can drastically affect your ability to influence a person's habits. You're going to learn how to use the IKEA effect to help people improve their habits, and you're going to learn about the strongest assessment of leadership capacity and how to systematically improve it in the people you lead. So let's start here. My coaching system is special. It's the only one of its kind in the world, and it's more effective than anything else on the market. But to really understand how special it is, let me tell you a story about how it was developed. Several years ago, I had a contract with Sandia National Laboratories in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And if you don't know, they are the facility of the Department of Energy specializing in maintaining the nuclear weapons of the United States military. They brought me in to develop a recurring social style seminar for their people. So I would teach this day-long class once a month with about 30 new people each time. And the topic was social style. If you don't know, social style is a personality type identifier like DISC or Myers-Briggs, and it basically categorizes people into 4 different personality types and teaches them how to communicate more effectively. Social style was developed by Tracom Corporation and was, at that time, the most popular communication program among Fortune 100 companies. In fact, it might still be the most popular today, I'm not sure. Anyway, as part of the training, each participant took an assessment to identify their social style. But this just wasn't any old personality assessment. It was something called a multi-rater assessment, and it held a whole new component that people weren't expecting. When people first received their reports, they got 2 pieces of information. The first was their social style. This told people their personality style and how to communicate more effectively with other types. Pretty standard information. Very effective, very helpful, but pretty standard. The second piece of information wasn't standard at all. It was their versatility score and had nothing to do with their personalities. A person's versatility score measures their capacity for leadership and influence. If someone scores high on versatility, then they are highly influential, whether they know it or not. By influential here, I'm not talking about the influence that comes from force or authority. It's the kind of influence that makes people want to follow you, kind of like leadership. The assessment was developed by a team of PhD psychologists, and it's administered as sort of a 360 feedback survey of about 10 to 15 key people. The information gets fed into a complex algorithm which rates people against a worldwide pool of workers. Now, versatility score itself is composed of 4 categories: competence, feedback, presentation, and image. Competence deals with your ability to successfully accomplish tasks. Feedback deals with your ability to build and establish positive relationships. Presentation deals with your ability to speak smoothly and effectively to groups. And image deals with your ability to influence others with your body and your environment. When people got their versatility scores, they can see how they rate in each of these major categories. And as it turns out, how you score in versatility has a major impact on your ability to be successful. Think about it. When you imagine people who are highly effective and highly successful, what do they look like? What do they act like? Do they struggle with their tasks and constantly break their commitments? Of course not. Do they have trouble communicating their messages to others? Do they often get frustrated because they can't express themselves? Of course not. Are they slouched over and dressed like a slob? It's difficult to even imagine, isn't it? You see, the truth is that we expect successful people to stand tall, communicate easily, and complete large projects with ease. We intuit this from the thousands and thousands of people that we've met, and we respond to the psychological principles that all humans share. But it's not just about your intuitions and psychological principles. In 2005, the Tracom Group, in conjunction with an international publishing company, performed a formal research study about versatility. They found that managers with high versatility were 27% better at leading teams. They were 25% better at coaching others, and they were 19% more likely to be promoted. They also analyzed compensation data and found that highly versatile managers received 29% more in total compensation than low versatile managers, and the average annual difference in salary was about $30,000. So, without a doubt, versatility is extremely important to a person's success. That brings us back to Sandia National Labs. When people got their reports, Many of them scored lower on versatility than they expected, and they wanted to know how to improve their versatility scores. But Tracom didn't have many resources for them. Tracom had done some great research, but they didn't have any real good system for increasing those scores. So at first I would just give people some tips and then send them on their way, never to see or hear from them again. But this didn't last very long until I grew dissatisfied. Here people's careers were on the line, and they wanted help. Workers wanted to succeed. They wanted to get promotions. Managers wanted their people to be more productive and successful. And I held the research to help them achieve it. If I couldn't help them increase their versatility, then what good was I? So I embarked on my own independent project to solve this problem. And in the process, I developed my coaching system. My system has two parts. The first is a collection of coaching workbooks, and the second is the method of using those workbooks. Together, these two parts have the purpose of increasing a person's versatility score. Each of them is equally important. If you use the workbooks without the method, you'll do some good, but you can't guarantee a rise in versatility. If you use the method without the workbooks, you'll have some productive coaching meetings, but you still won't be able to guarantee an increase in versatility. If your goal is improvement, real, measurable, lasting improvement, then you need to use both. So let's start by looking at the workbooks. I've created 4 unique workbooks, one for each component of the versatility score. There's a workbook for competence, feedback, image, and presentation. And these workbooks contain modules that teach specific skills that will help people improve their score. For example, if someone scores low on feedback, then that means they need to develop more effective communication scripts. So the workbook has a module about appreciative versus evaluative praise. And people will create new, real-world scripts that they can begin using immediately. And when people start acting differently, then they start getting different results. That's how change occurs. That's an example of the modules, and each workbook has an average of 6 modules, each of which teach a highly specific skill that directly impacts versatility. So what do we have here? We have 4 workbooks that contain about 6 modules each for a total of 24 modules. Do you see what that gives us? It gives us the ability to prescribe a specific course of action for any given versatility deficiency. It makes you a leadership doctor. Think about it. The multi-rater assessment allows you to diagnose a person, and the workbooks allow you to prescribe an effective treatment. Nobody else has this. It's something that I invented and developed on my own, and it's unheard of in the coaching industry. Most managers, professional coaches are just like rah-rah cheerleaders who produce no actionable results. Managers who coach, a lot of them, don't have a clue which step to take to make their people more effective. But that's exactly what you can accomplish with this coaching system. That's the power of my coaching system. Now let's look at the second part of my coaching system, the method. Once you've diagnosed a person and have prescribed the appropriate workbook, you're still not done. In fact, this is where the real coaching begins. It's not coaching if you just assign somebody a workbook and leave them alone. In this situation, it's nearly impossible for the person to maximize their potential. You have to personally engage them in their lives. In fact, Stanford researchers have studied the power of the so-called gentle nudge. They conducted the study in the realm of fitness and involved participants who wanted to work out and exercise more. In other words, they had a built-in incentive. But as we all know, everybody wants to exercise more, but very few of us ever get around to doing it. That's kind of the holy grail of the fitness industry. Getting people to exercise more, consistently, over time. It's devilishly difficult to accomplish, and nearly every product, fad, advertising scheme, and gimmick has been tried to achieve it. But the researchers found something interesting. Simply receiving a phone call every 2 weeks increased the amount of exercise people did by an average of 78%. This is an amazing increase in productivity. But the research didn't end. After 18 months, they found that participants who received those phone calls were still exercising at an increased level. This is an amazing result. A gentle nudge produced an astonishing change in performance. And does anyone doubt that doing 78% more exercise each week for 18 months will generate changes in the body? Of course it will. Everyone knows that. Well, it works the same with leadership. If you perform better over time, then you will get better results. No one can prevent that. That's why the workbooks alone are not enough. People need you to give them the gentle nudge. You need to enter their life and help them grow. What if your efforts translated into 78% more work from the people you coached? Would the coaching be worth it? You bet it would. And so that's the basis of my coaching method. You've got to personally be involved, and ideally it would be in person, but you can also get it done over the phone or video conference. Personally, I like to do a mix when possible. I'll meet with a person once a month, and then I'll schedule a meeting 2 weeks afterwards just to touch base and provide a gentle nudge. But you should always adjust your program to meet the needs of the situation. But just remember 2 things. 1, you've got to be consistent. Remember the Stanford study? They called every 2 weeks, not just most 2 weeks. Consistency is the necessary requirement for any positive change. And 2, don't let too much time pass between meetings. I've made the mistake of meeting people every 2 or 3 months. That's not good. It's too much time in between nudges, and a great deal of the benefit goes away. I think the maximum time between meetings should be about a month. Like I said, I like to meet every month and then call 2 weeks afterwards. In my experience, that's produced the best results. Okay, so now you have the workbooks and the meeting schedules. Now what? How do you conduct a coaching meeting? What are you supposed to say? Well, this is the meat of my coaching method, and I'll call it the 5 steps of a coaching meeting. And here are the steps in the order that you should use them. 1, agenda. Send a meeting agenda the day before the meeting. 2, acknowledgement. Acknowledge and react to their performance. 3, active learning. Present a concept and let them practice it. 4, artifact. Help them create something valuable. 5, application. Give them some homework to complete before the next meeting. These 5 steps of a coaching meeting are incredibly effective. Each step is based on cutting-edge psychological research, and I've personally tested each step through hundreds of coaching meetings. And we'll discuss all this shortly, but for now, just notice how easily it is to use. Let's just walk through an example of these steps in action. Let's say you're going to coach Bill. First, on the first day of the meeting, you pull out your file on the person you're going to coach, Bill. And you see that last month you assigned Bill the homework of confronting a coworker. And you note which skill you'll work on this month. So you prepare an agenda with this in mind. You send it to Bill. And the next day, it's the day of the meeting, you sit down with Bill. And you small talk for a moment, then you transition to the agenda. You simply ask, Bill, how'd the confrontation go? And then he starts to tell you the whole story. And you don't rush into advice mode. You just listen, ask questions, take notes. When you do speak, you reference his goals, his past artifacts, and the logical consequences of his actions. And you praise him for completing his homework. This gives him a little bump in dopamine and makes it more likely he'll do his homework in the future. Third, you move on to the skill, appreciative praise. Here you say a few words and give Bill a quiz that's found in the workbook. You might even do a role play so Bill really feels like, he really feels what it's like to deliver appreciative praise. What's the difference between beginners and achievers? Practice, right? And when he has questions, you answer them clearly and reiterating its importance. And then fourth, you create an artifact. You have Bill create his own scripts for appreciative praise. Scripts that encourage and reinforce the behavior that Bill wants to bring out in his people. These scripts will serve as a reference point in the future. His ideas, his handwriting, his creation, this makes it much more likely that he'll take ownership of and apply these scripts. Fifth and finally, you have him commit to applying the scripts over the next month. This is his homework, to use each of those scripts from his artifact 5 times. He has 3 scripts, so that's a total of 15 instances of appreciative praise, or about 1 a day. He agrees to it, writes down the commitment, and signs his initials. That concludes the meeting. Those are the 5 steps in action. And it seems like a smooth meeting, doesn't it? The truth is, it should be smooth. It's a highly refined system that packs a lot of punch without being intimidating. I want you to remember this as we dive deep into each of these steps. When performed properly, each of these steps should feel smooth and natural. That's what makes you a great coach. And great coaches create great leaders. The first step of a coaching meeting is to create and send out a meeting agenda. Notice that this occurs before the meeting actually begins, and that's important. As a coach, your work starts well before the coaching meeting. You want to create an agenda and send it out before the meeting, preferably 24 hours before the meeting. And this has 5 major benefits. First, it serves as a reminder. Many of the people you'll coach will be busy, overwhelmed rising stars. And it's easy for these people to let a coaching meeting slip to the back burner. It's not that they intend to neglect it. They're just so busy with everything else that it just slips their mind. So when they receive an agenda, it jogs their memory. And this also has another benefit. After every meeting, you will be giving them an assignment. These assignments are critical to the coaching process and play a large role when it comes to increasing versatility. So when the people fail to complete their assignments, they are letting themselves down. But when you send an agenda a day in advance, you give them a last-minute chance to complete that assignment. Second, a meeting agenda helps you with charting. Remember the analogy from my coaching system? You're a leadership doctor. You diagnose with their versatility, and then you prescribe treatment to raise it over time. Well, let's take this analogy one step further. What is it that every doctor does before walking into a patient's room? She reads the chart. The chart reminds her of the diagnosis and what treatments have been used in the past. Only then does she walk in and speak with the patient. As a coach, you've got to be the same way. You've got to take this just as seriously. When you're coaching meetings, you've got to pull up your chart on whoever you're coaching beforehand. And you need to review his progress and how he's responded and what concerns he has. That way, when you enter the meeting, you can ask, did that county department ever get those expense reports figured out? Or, how did that presentation go? This will give you immense credibility and put you in a position to give more effective counsel. That's the power of charting. But charting also helps you prepare for the meeting. If a doctor checks a chart and doesn't recognize a disease, she can go look it up or ask one of her fellow doctors. And the same principle applies to coaching. If you aren't comfortable with the agenda topics, then you can research them and refamiliarize yourself. You've got to have a deep understanding of these topics in order to smoothly and effectively answer questions as they arrive. The third benefit of a meeting agenda is that it helps manage expectations. When you outline the topics and discussion points of a meeting, people know what to expect. And people have a tendency to live up to others' expectations. If you tell people to expect a fight, they'll show up with weapons. But if you tell them to expect a focused, productive meeting, then they will be in an active, productive state of mind. When you send an agenda, you tell people that you're serious and that you want to accomplish several specific things. And they'll appreciate this. And they won't worry about all the other things that they might otherwise suspect. And they won't feel the stress of uncertainty or the anxiety of having to set that direction. They'll come mentally prepared for your agenda. And when they know what to expect, you can hit the ground running when the meeting starts, which leads to our fourth benefit, really, efficiency. When people know what to expect and what's expected of them, then they can prepare, and preparation equals speed. Countless hours are wasted trying to bring people up to speed. If you do this during your coaching sessions, then you'll start slowly. You'll spend about half the time compensating for a lack of preparation. The thought of this inefficiency just makes me cringe. For a coaching meeting to have maximum impact, both parties need to be prepared. You need to prepare for the meeting by reviewing their progress and unfamiliar concepts. That's charting. And the person you're coaching needs to prepare by completing their assignments and reading any supplemental materials that you gave them as homework. So the meeting agenda helps guarantee both of these. For that reason alone, it has immense value. Now, the fifth and final benefit of the meeting agenda is it allows you to set a good example. As we've seen, the meeting agenda has numerous benefits, and these benefits go well beyond the realm of coaching. They provide everyone with a more professional, more efficient, and more polished meetings. And this is something that everyone you coach can benefit from. Because in most workplaces, meeting agendas are uncommon. So very few people have seen them used correctly. So that's where you come in. When you use a meeting agenda, you model for them how to use it. And once they see how well it works and how it keeps people on track without being rigid, then they will want to use it in their lives. Then they can look to your example for the nuances of how you use it properly. And this can become the basis of a highly effective coaching session. So, how do you use a meeting agenda? Well, I've been actually studying this for about 5 years, and I've experimented with different methods, different styles, and I've created a battle-tested agenda that has been used successfully across many different industries and corporate structures. So if you want, I'll email you a copy of my agenda free of charge. But if you want to invest the time and energy to develop your own agenda, that's okay too. Here are some things, though, that you should make sure to include. 1, state the purpose of the meeting. And, you got to set a clear measurement for success. So in your purpose, answer this question. If we get this done, it will be a productive meeting. Now, this is pretty straightforward when you're using the coaching workbooks and charting properly, because you'll set the purpose as the next module or resolving another lingering issue. But whatever it is, state it clearly at the top of the agenda. Number 2, identify the time, the date, the location of the meeting. There's no more frustrating waste of time than wandering the halls looking for someplace to meet. It kills momentum and it hurts your credibility. So if it's your office, great, that's easy. If it's going to be a conference room, make sure to schedule it well in advance. If it's to be over the phone or video chat, then lock in the time. Just make sure that the meeting time and location is known by everyone that needs to know. 3, tell them how to prepare. Remember, preparation equals speed. If there is something they need to do in advance to prepare, state that clearly. Provide all the tools and materials necessary for their preparation, and don't assign something that they can't accomplish. But state it clearly enough that it won't be missed or easily ignored. Number 4, the agenda items. This is where you identify the things you want to accomplish. These are the steps necessary to accomplish the purpose. This is incredibly important for the success of your coaching meeting. But once again, this is made simple through my coaching system. You simply need to list the remaining steps of my coaching method: acknowledgement, active learning, artifact, assignment. But don't list them verbatim like that. You need to do a little bit more work than that. You need to apply the coaching step to the current meeting. For example, don't write acknowledge performance. Write review the results of Tuesday's presentation. This fulfills the function of that coaching step without drawing attention to the basic structure. Include these 4 points in your meeting agenda and you'll be off to a great start. Now, ideally, you want to send this 24 hours ahead. Electronically, an email is what I always do. But I like to physically print the template out and use my personal handwriting on it and then scan it and email that. I found that this makes the biggest impact. And it shows that I'm taking this seriously. And it's a way to stand out from their otherwise overflowing inboxes. Once you get the agenda completed and send it out, it's time to show up to the coaching meeting. And this requires the next step of my coaching method. The second step of my coaching method is acknowledgement. And by this I mean you verbally review the facts of their recent performance. In the context of coaching, this usually means asking about the assignment. For example, if their homework was to deliver 10 statements about appreciative praise, you simply ask them, how many statements of appreciative praise did you deliver this month? In other words, the acknowledgement step is where you count the chickens. What happened? And what events led to what outcomes? You need to bring up the facts and get them from their own mouths about their performance. Now, often they will bring up some problem apart from the coaching workbook, and that's okay. This principle still applies. For example, if they tell you about a conflict they had, then ask them for the facts. What did you say? Did you raise your voice? Were you seated or standing? These are the types of questions that elicit the facts, and that is the basis for the acknowledgement step. You might not realize this, but this simple activity has a huge impact on their performance. Do you remember the Stanford study about the gentle nudge? That study revealed that when people received a phone call every 2 weeks, they worked out an average of 78% more. Now, that's a huge testament to the power of coaching. But let's dive a little deeper into the study. We know that the participants received a phone call every 2 weeks. But what was said on those phone calls? Did the researchers berate the participants? Did they lecture them on the downfalls of laziness? Did they give universally positive and upbeat affirmations? No, they did none of these things. Actually, the phone call was extremely simple. First, the researchers found out how much exercise was done in the past week. Second, they gave simple tips about how the level of exercise could be increased the following week. And third, and only if the workouts were missed, they reaffirmed the importance of getting back on track. That's it. They didn't make a big deal about negative performance. They simply emphasized the benefits of consistent workouts, appealing to the very reasons that the participants already knew and accepted. In other words, they basically just acknowledged and recorded people's behavior. And that simple formula, they increased people's performance by almost 80%. This research makes a strong case for the acknowledgement step. It tells us the simple act of acknowledging a person's performance can drastically improve their performance. It works because it takes away a person's capacity for denial. When they report their performance, they have to face the facts about their performance. And if their performance is embarrassing, then they'll have an incentive to change their behavior. Add in a subtle dose of peer pressure, and you have a strong cocktail for change. Consider the curious case of Michael Masterson. Michael Masterson is a man from humble roots who, through hard work, started earning a drastically higher income. But the higher income didn't immediately translate into higher net worth. So Michael went to an accountant named Lewis and asked for help. And here's the experience in Michael's own words. We began our relationship by creating my first personal balance sheet. It was good to see that after so many years of struggling, I was finally worth something. 6 months later, we tallied my wealth for the second time. I was anticipating a huge number because I'd enjoyed several extremely significant financial windfalls. I was also enjoying my new house, my new car, and so on. You can imagine how upset I was to discover that I was not, as expected, getting richer. Instead, I was getting poorer. I guess I'll have to make more money, I said. You're making plenty of that. You're plenty of money, Lewis assured me. The problem is you're spending too much. To remedy my overspending habit, I expected Lewis would put me on a budget. Budget schmudget, he said. We'll start looking at your balance sheet every month. And that's what we did. Once a month, he'd stop by my office, we'd add up the numbers, and it didn't take long for my financial trajectory to begin moving in the right direction. Simply by counting my money once a month, my bad spending habits quickly halted. Do you see the power of acknowledgement at play here? Lewis didn't try to guilt Michael into wiser financial choices, and he didn't pass harsh judgment on his purchases. Instead, he just started counting Michael's money every month. And this simple action was a catalyst for Michael to develop more and more productive habits. As a professional coach, my goal is to replicate Lewis's success. Like Lewis, I meet my clients once a month. And like Lewis, I start each meeting by acknowledging the facts and long-term trends of performance. And just like Lewis, I've seen this have a tremendous influence on people's habits. It's just so simple, but in some ways, I think that this is really the secret weapon of exceptional coaching. Mediocre coaches focus on giving advice. When there's a problem, they want to jump in and show how smart they are. So they launch on a lecture and try to convince the other person to change. But notice how different this is from Lewis's approach. Lewis didn't focus on advice. He focused on facts. He didn't get caught up in short-term events, but he shifted the conversation to long-term trends. And in this way, he produced a real change in Michael's habits. This is what you need to do as a coach. This is how you create real change. But I'll admit, it isn't easy. I used to be one of those coaches who did more talking than listening. And it took me a long time to learn the habit of acknowledgement. So it might take you a long time to develop it. But it's one of the most powerful things you can do to coach people. Peter Drucker said, "What gets measured gets managed." That's what you're doing when you objectively acknowledge their performance. You are measuring. And once you start measuring and recording performance, people will naturally start to improve their habits. The third step of my coaching method is active learning. In order to change, people must change their behaviors. In my coaching workbook, I've identified the behaviors that will make people more effective and influential. If they learn these skills and turn them into habits, then they will achieve more success. No doubt about it. But this brings up an important question. How are you, as a coach, supposed to help them learn and apply these skills? How do you introduce a new idea and expect them to change? Well, my research and experience have led me to the concept of active learning. Now, by active learning, I mean that the person you're coaching is engaged and participating in their learning. In many ways, you want them to direct the learning. Contrast this against passive learning. Now, passive learning is what you see in most college classrooms. You have a teacher standing up there in front of the classroom, and then you have a bunch of students sitting back down in the audience. And in this scenario, the teacher dumps information and the students passively receive it. That's passive learning. But active learning is different. Think of active learning like a student in a batting cage, and his dad is standing right outside the cage watching him swing. In this case, the student is performing, and the teacher is mostly silent. That's active learning. And the dad, if he says anything, doesn't launch into a long lecture. He merely says, "Looks like you dropped your elbow on that last swing." The teacher is letting the student take center stage while he observes intently from the sidelines. Now that's how you need to approach the coaching process. And here's an easy way to remember how to act. In the first example, when the teacher stood at the front of the class and lectured, we say that he was trying to be a sage on the stage. He had all the attention and he was doing all the work. But things were different in the second scenario. Here we didn't have a sage on the stage, but we had a guide on the side. He gave valuable advice, but he didn't have the attention on him, and he wasn't doing all the work. He was a guide on the side. And this is what you need to be. Give up trying to be the sage on the stage. That's not going to help your people grow. Active learning only works when you know how to act like a guide on the side. So what's the ultimate benefit of active learning and being a guide on the side? In order to improve, people you coach need to practice. Just like the student in the batting cage, your people need to take reps. Practice makes perfect. And people need to practice things in order to be able to use them. But it's amazing how many coaches don't realize this. They don't even think about giving people a skill to practice. And so they make a classic mistake of the sage on the stage. Interestingly, most good managers seem to grasp this concept. But they don't know what skills to help people practice. It seems so obvious when it comes to baseball and batting practice, but leadership skills are less obvious to non-professionals. And that's where my coaching workbook comes in. They feature the exact skill that people need to practice. And the point here is that you need to know how to use a workbook. Don't present it like a sage on the stage, and don't explain the whole concept perfectly before any action is taken. Be a guide on the side. Present the idea in its bare essentials, just enough that the person can start using it. Then watch them and make notes. Affirm the things they do well and acknowledge the things they're doing right. This gives them the feedback they need to adjust. But if you never put them into action, then they can't adjust and improve. And when you learn something new, you don't really have it until you can put it into action. And that's the difference between something being simple and easy. Simplicity is an intellectual attribute. It means that you understand a concept clearly and effortlessly. For example, you might be able to name the capital of the United States of America. That piece of information is simple. You can reach that conclusion immediately. The opposite of simplicity is complexity. Consider the theory of relativity. Now, you wouldn't call that simple because it involves so many abstracts and counterintuitive concepts. So we have simplicity on one side and complexity on the other. Notice that when it comes to simplicity, we're dealing with knowledge and understanding. It's all in your head. It's purely conceptual. In contrast, easiness is a physical attribute. It means that you can accomplish something flawlessly without strain. For example, you might find it easy to take a photograph. Just take out your phone and push a button. It's incredibly easy to do. Even babies can do it. The opposite of easiness is difficulty. Consider painting an oil canvas to replicate the photo that you just took with your phone. Now, this isn't intellectually complicated. Just arrange colors in the same pattern as your eye sees reality. But this is incredibly difficult to do. It takes people decades of their life to develop the ability to paint a realistic picture. Now, notice how this is different than simplicity. While simplicity deals with your intellectual understanding, easiness deals with your ability to perform. Something is only easy once you can physically perform the action, like tying your shoes. Now, let's apply this to coaching. As a coach, your primary job is not to turn complexity into simplicity. Your primary job is to make things easy for people. And here's what a sage on the stage might do. He might talk about all the complexities of a topic just to show off how smart he is. Now, that's a big mistake. Here's what an amateur might do. He tries to get someone to practice a difficult task, trying to get someone to practice 1,000 things at once. Again, that's a big mistake. Here's what you need to do. Make complicated ideas simple and difficult tasks easy. The simpler the concept, the more likely it is that people will practice it. And the easier the task, the more likely it is that people's performance will improve. Break down important tasks into their essential behaviors, and then drill people on these easy essentials. As they improve, you can begin to discuss and drill the more complicated nuances of the task, like building a positive reinforcement of their confidence and enthusiasm. But that's only valuable once you have a proficiency in the basic. This is the whole key to active learning. So how do you do it? Well, there are two major ways to engage people in active learning. The first is quizzes. Now, I love quizzes. They're a great way to put knowledge to the test in an active way. First of all, when I give quizzes, I don't even grade them or record them. Quizzes are a teaching tool, and they're designed to make people choose. For example, I might ask people to identify which statement falls into the category of appreciative praise and which fall into the category of evaluative praise. You see what this does? In the first place, it simplifies the idea and shows how it applies in a real-world scenario. But it also turns them from passive to active participants. You see, I can define it for them all day long, but once I ask them to make a decision using that information, then it becomes real. Then they engage a whole different part of their brain and learn it at a higher level. Now, the trick with quizzes is to give them some questions that are easy to build their confidence. Then you can throw in a few tricky questions to test the nuances of their knowledge. But remember, these aren't to be graded. They're simply teaching tools. If a question starts a discussion, that's a good thing. It means they're taking the idea seriously. The second way to engage people in active learning is role plays. Now, role playing is the gold standard of coaching. When baseball players practice, pitchers throw to them as if it were a real game. And the same principle applies in business. People need to practice new skills in order to use them in their real lives. So let's get on with it. Have them give the appreciative praise as if you were one of their subordinates. If they have a presentation to give next Tuesday, then have them stand up and deliver it. If they need to confront someone, then pretend to be that person and have them confront you. Role-playing like this provides incredible benefits to the role player. It's the method for turning a difficult task into an easy one. You let them practice it until they get a feel for it, and they can do it comfortably. That's when they return to work, and they still have that muscle memory of doing it. And that's extremely powerful catalyst for change. Now, it's true, a lot of people resist the idea of role play. It's uncomfortable for a lot of people. Some people think it's childish. And you got to help them through that. All change is uncomfortable. Coaching hurts. But your job is to make them feel uncomfortable with you in a safe environment and not out in the moment of truth. You want them to have a performance with a certain level of confidence out in the real world. And for that, they need to role play with you. And I can honestly say that almost everyone I've role played with, from frontline workers to CEOs, was glad to have it done afterwards. At least they learned a lot. They all admit that. And they consistently rank it as one of the most valuable things we do. So you need to use it as a coach. Are you uncomfortable delivering a role play? Well, you've got to get over that. If you truly want your people to grow, then you have to be willing to role play with them. You may develop other ways to engage in active learning with your people, and that's great. The most important thing is that you internalize that guide on the side mentality and engage your people in active learning during every coaching meeting you can. This is one of the best things you can do to equip and grow the people you coach. The fourth step in my coaching method is to have them create an artifact. What's an artifact? In archaeology, an artifact is something created by a human that has some cultural or historical interest. For example, an ancient pottery is considered to be an artifact because someone created it and it gives us insight into their beliefs, their values, and state of mind. It gives us evidence that previous civilization existed, and it also gives us a basis for understanding them. And we can extend this concept into coaching. I use the term artifact to describe anything created by the person during the coaching meeting. An easy example to understand is a list of goals. When someone creates a list of goals, they've created something substantial that can anchor them to what they've learned. And that's what an artifact does. It's something that exists now that didn't exist before the meeting. And it's something that both of us, them and me, can use to drive higher performance. Artifacts have 5 major benefits for coaching. Let's go over these 5. Number 1, people are more likely to remember the things that they remember. Now, it's long been a staple of the personal development industry to encourage people to make a list of written goals. And maybe many people have said that this is the primary difference between successful and unsuccessful people. Now, why is this so popular, and why does it have so much plausibility? Well, a lot of people justify this claim going back to the 1946 research of Edgar Dale at Ohio State. During this research, he created the cone of learning, where it generally goes like this. People remember about 10% of what they read, but they remember 20% of what they hear and 30% of what they see. And they remember 50% of what they see and hear and 70% of what they say and write and 90% of what they do. Now, modern researchers have really challenged the practice of putting the specific universal percentages on those categories, but the basic concept is as strong as ever. If you want somebody to remember something, then get them to do it or experience it. And we've applied this principle already to role plays. But now we're going to take it a step further. When someone creates an artifact, they engage a much larger part of their brain than if they just listened to it and agreed with your ideas. To create something, you have to put your heart and soul into creation, and this makes it an incredibly memorable experience. And a person's ability to remember important concepts is absolutely essential in their quest to apply them. Number 2, nobody argues with their own data. I learned this from the legendary trainer Bob Pike. He identified an interesting feature of human nature. If you tell a person something, then they evaluate it. They wonder whether or not to accept that, and they look for flaws. But if a person tells you something, then they're no longer trying to evaluate it. They're ready to defend it. So they don't look for flaws, they look for strengths. So Bob Pike applied this to corporate training. He would all but refuse to teach people, even important or obvious things. Instead, he would try to get them to come up with the answers themselves. Because once somebody reached a belief on their own, then it was a much sturdier and stubborn belief than it otherwise would have been. Think about it. How many times have you told someone that they need to pick up a new habit, say, changing their diet or something? How did that work out? Probably not very well. But when people come to that conclusion on their own, then there's no limit to what they can achieve. So let's apply this to coaching. If you sit down and tell someone that he needs to start making 20 cold calls a day, then you're unlikely to generate much change. But what if you asked them to create an artifact? What if you said, could you write down 5 habits that if you followed them consistently would revolutionize your sales career? Then what would be the likelihood that they would write down on there something about making cold calls? Probably pretty high. And once they write it, then it's their idea and they own it. You could even say things like, I really like your idea about cold calls. I've seen that work with people in the past. And they will accept your advice with incredible openness. Why? Because nobody argues with their own data. Number 3, they will think higher of coaching. When people participate in the construction of something, they like it more. Or, as it's sometimes put, labor leads to love. This principle is known as the IKEA effect, after a study published in 2011 by a team of researchers from Harvard, Tulane, and Duke. Have you ever been to IKEA, the Swedish furniture store? When you buy their furniture, you don't receive it in the final assembled form. You basically buy a furniture kit that you have to take home and assemble it yourself. And IKEA has been widely successful with this business model. So a team of researchers devised an experiment. They had a team of experts assemble a series of projects from IKEA furniture to Lego sets. And then they had research participants assemble the same things. Now, obviously, the experts did a better job to objective standards. But here's the interesting thing. The participants didn't see it that way. They saw their projects as being efficiently assembled as those of the experts. And worse yet, they honestly expected everybody else to share their opinion. That's the IKEA effect. People place a higher value on the things that they create. So let's bring this back to the coaching artifact. If you give people a list of helpful tips, then they may or may not take those tips to heart. But when you have someone create a useful, meaningful artifact, then the IKEA effect kicks in. All of a sudden, they view those same tips as being nuggets of wisdom. And all of a sudden, they see this coaching meeting as an extremely productive work session. That's the IKEA effect. And artifacts utilize this concept perfectly. Number 4, create evidence. They create evidence of a productive conversation. One of the biggest concerns people have about coaching is that it might be a waste of time. And time is precious, and these days people are busier than ever. They don't want to feel like they just flushed an hour down the drain. And unfortunately, many professional coaches out there just waste people's time. These coaches have no plan, no method, and they just leave people with a bad taste in their mouth. But interestingly enough, having a good meeting isn't always enough to make people think that it was a productive meeting. Think about that. You can have an extremely productive meeting with one of your people, and they still might think it was a waste. This is definitely a problem. If people think that the meeting was a waste, then they're unlikely to keep meeting. And consistently meeting is absolutely necessary for success. So why would a person think that a productive meeting was a waste? Because so often coaching meetings leave no evidence. So people go back to their busy schedules and forget all about the meeting. And when they see the next meeting on their schedule, they have nothing to remind them of the progress that was made. That's where artifacts come in. When people have an artifact, they can immediately see the value in the meetings. They'll pick it up and say, wow, I remember this. I remember making this. This was such a good meeting. The artifacts represent tangible evidence of the value they received, and this makes them more committed to the coaching process. Number 5, create a reference for a continual source of inspiration. This is perhaps the most obvious benefit of an artifact, but it makes it no less important. When you have a conversation, it's lost forever. But when you make an artifact, you can come back to it time and time and time again. It has lasting influence. Let me tell you a personal story here. For over a decade now, I've been keeping journals. And in these journals, I write about family events and provide a record of things that happened to me over the years. But one of the things I've always done is at the beginning of the year, in the front of my journal, I write my goals. And I have over 10 years of goals in leather-bound journals on my bookshelf behind me here. And sometimes when I'm feeling low, I'll go back to those old journals and look at my goals. And I'll see all the productive thinking and the enthusiasm that went into those goals. And it helps me re-energize and gives me a head start on my current thinking. In a way, it's like that saying, standing on the shoulders of giants. Sir Isaac Newton was one of the biggest intellectual giants of his age. He had a very short life, but he basically invented the sciences of calculus and physics. And he was asked once how he was able to accomplish so much. And he said, "If I have been able to see further than others, it was only because I have stood on the shoulders of giants." In other words, he didn't have to start from square one to accomplish everything. He just had to pick up where those before him had left off. He just had to stand on the shoulders of giants. And that's how I feel when I look at my old journals. And that's how you need to have your people feel. First, they need to learn from the wisdom of you, their coach. And second, they need to learn from their own progress, picking up where they left off each month. They need to stand on their own shoulders. And that's what artifacts can help them do. And number 6, artifacts hold them accountable with their own words. Now, I've saved this one for last because it's the most powerful. But by now, you've probably figured it out for yourself. Artifacts are indispensable for effective accountability. If you're a manager, you might be tempted to use your position to instill accountability with the implied threat, if you don't do it, you're going to, or else. And this threat does work in a limited sense. That can't be argued. But I've learned about the power of accountability from a position of non-authority. As a professional coach, I come into companies and coach people with no authority, no threat of punishment. I can't threaten people into compliance. There's nothing that I can do to force participation. So I've had to develop other means to enforce accountability, and I've had to develop a technique that relied on voluntary compliance. And it worked. I started getting enthusiastic compliance even though I had no formal means of enforcing anything. And then a funny thing happened. I showed this technique to managers and people who did have formal authority. And when they started using this voluntary technique, they started getting more compliance from their people. In fact, the more they use a voluntary compliance technique, the less they had to rely on positional power. This in turn made people more receptive to the voluntary technique. And this just a spiral feedback up, 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 up. So what's this voluntary technique? You guessed it, it's the artifact. When someone creates an artifact, they're in many ways making a commitment. And once this happens, you don't have to hold them accountable with an external incentive. You can hold them accountable with their very own words, with their own commitments. Remember, nobody argues with their own data. All you have to do is keep people consistent with their own commitments. Accountability becomes an exercise in integrity, and most people have a very strong desire to maintain the perception of integrity. But this only works if you have something to point to, something that they can't evade as their mood changes. In short, you need an artifact. So now we've seen how beneficial artifacts can be. The question remains, how do you create them? Well, this is simple. In my coaching workbook, I've created an artifact template for each module. So all you have to do is guide a person through it. The basic tip is this. At each step of the progress, encourage the person to be as rationally optimistic as possible. Appeal to the best part of the person and have them create this from the highest part of themselves. Remember, this artifact is going to be a beacon of light over the coming months and years. Encourage people to create from the noblest part of themselves. Do this, and your coaching efforts will already have achieved tremendous success. The fifth step of my coaching method is assignment. And by assignment, I mean assigning them a task to complete after the coaching meeting and before the next one begins. You can think of it like homework. Well, it is homework. At the coaching meeting, you discuss and drill the content, and then they go work on it without you. The basic idea of an assignment is to get people to go out and apply what they've learned to real life circumstances, to translate the theory into practice. As a manager I know likes to say, eventually you've got to go play with live ammo. Accordingly, homework consists of real activities. Your people need to have real conversations, give real speeches, change real habits, and make real decisions. That's the whole point of assignment. Now, where does the assignment come from? Well, it usually comes from the artifacts. For example, for the artifact, you might have someone write down 5 statements of appreciative praise that will encourage behaviors that they want to promote. Then for the assignment, you might assign them to use each of those scripts of appreciative praise 5 times during the month. And this is one of the strengths of my coaching system. Everything is tightly integrated. And this makes the assignment a natural extension of the coaching meeting. And it gives an even stronger relevance to the artifacts. Here are some of the benefits of assigning homework. 1, they'll retain the information better. Remember the research by Edgar Dale? To remember things, we must do them. Do them, and we may even remember up to 90%. And so this is true for assignments, just like it's true for active learning. In fact, it may be even more true for assignments. When people apply new ideas to their work circumstances, they start to get rapid feedback. And this feedback often comes with an emotional intensity not present during active learning. For example, if people practice a presentation during a coaching meeting, then their emotional involvement is relatively low. After all, it's practice. But if then they give that same presentation at an important meeting and they get a standing ovation and a personal compliment from their boss, then the experience carries a lot more weight. It's driven down deep into their subconscious in a way that will make them more likely to access it in the future. And this is important. We need this to happen to cement the change. And that's why assignments are so critical. We need to get them this emotional experience as soon as possible. The quicker it happens, the more likely it is to work. Number 2, they will calibrate their style. As people use a new skill in real life, they get rapid feedback. And this feedback allows for minor adjustments. And these minor adjustments can make a big difference. For example, someone might confront a coworker about unacceptable performance, but his voice might be slightly too loud or too commanding. And it's amazing how much differently this experience goes if he just softens his voice by just 10%. And this small change makes a big difference. But for a beginner, when everything happens so quickly, this subtlety is difficult to achieve. And that's why people need assignments. They need to get all of this real-world feedback and share it with their coach. Then they will make adjustments to their style, finding the optimal methods for each individual. This is calibration, and it's how great people become great. And the process runs on feedback provided by assignments. 3, results are the name of the game. After all, why go through all of the hard work to create an artifact unless it's actually going to be used to make your life better? People need the incentive of a better life. And make no mistake, assignments are absolutely essential to long-term improvement. If they don't take their coaching lesson into the real world, then no change will ever happen. And this is unacceptable. Results are the name of the game. I've built my reputation in the marketplace by being more results-oriented than anybody else. In a world full of feel-good coaches, I set myself apart by guaranteeing measurable improvements in leadership, influence, and versatility. And a few times I've gone so far as to work without payment and to take payment only if and when their profits grew to a certain level. And that gave me razor focus, even an obsessive focus on results. My livelihood depended on it. And I learned quickly that assignments are absolutely crucial. And this same lesson applies to you. When you coach your people, you need to commit to doing everything you can to generate positive change. And if you want your people to grow and improve, then you can't risk neglecting their assignments. Homework changes lives. It's true in school, and it's true in coaching. So let's get on with it. Now we've come to the end of the ultimate coaching formula. First and foremost, we've seen the importance of coaching. For thousands of years, coaching has been a primary method of personal development. And today we see it as a constant in nearly every field, including athletics, politics, and entertainment. But in the world of business, coaching is extremely underutilized. But things are changing, and now the top companies are realizing that it's a major strategic asset. And now the top leaders are incorporating the principles of coaching into their own efforts. Second, we looked at the concept of versatility. Versatility is a measurement of leadership based on the 4 components of image, presentation, competence, and feedback. And if you recall, people with high versatility are 27% better at leading teams. This is a leadership metric around which I built the ultimate coaching formula. And this coaching system allows you to prescribe a specific coaching workbook to address the specific needs of each person you coached. It's unparalleled in the coaching industry, and it gives you the ability to become a leadership doctor, diagnosing and prescribing with stunning precision. Then we took a closer look at my coaching method. We saw how sending a meeting agenda allows you to prepare for and chart progress. We saw the incredible power of acknowledgement and how it alone can catalyze a massive change in behavior. Then we looked at active learning and how it supercharges learning through participation and practice. And that brought us to the idea of artifacts and how they lock in development, allowing people to stand on their own shoulders. And finally, we saw that because results are the name of the game, it's necessary to assign homework. So these are the 5 steps of my coaching method, and they can help you develop anybody into their fullest potential. Notice that each step can be remembered with the letter A: agenda, acknowledgement, active learning, artifact, assignment. 5 A's. 5 things to do during every coaching meeting. And now you have the tools to use them. So where do you go from here? Well, you have several options. First, you might be thinking, you know what, Bob? This isn't for me. And if that's you, that's okay. I understand that some people might not see this as a good fit. Second, you might be thinking, sounds good, but I want to learn more. And if this is the case, I can send you an information packet so you can look over the whole system. I'll send you a versatility report. I'll send you a sample coaching workbook. I'll send you a real-life coaching report. And if you want to, for a small fee, you can actually take the versatility report for yourself. And that will give you real actionable data about your social style and your current level of versatility. So if you want any of these options, just email me, bob@bobramseyseminars.com, or call 618-406-3263. Okay, third thing you might be thinking is, Bob, this sounds great. I want to coach my people using this system. What are my next steps? Well, if that's the case, contact me and I can help you get all your people assessed and prescribed. And I can license you the workbooks and even provide monthly coaching support over the phone. Fourth, you might be thinking, this sounds great, but I'm too busy to keep track of all the details. Bob, I want you to coach my people. If that's the case, then things get easy. I'm a professional. I've done this hundreds of times. We just need to schedule a phone call to touch base about your needs, and then I'll roll out my program just like we described. Either way, I'll take care of all the details. And finally, you might be thinking, Bob, this sounds great, and I really believe in personal development, so I want you to coach me. After all, I'm a leader, and I need to raise my versatility. Well, I can help here too. Because if there's one thing that I've learned by chairing a CEO roundtable, is that the best executives are those that are always learning and getting better. And of course, coaching is one of the most effective ways to get better. After all, Michael Jordan had a coach. So if you're interested in coaching, then let's chat about that. But whatever you do and whatever your interests, I hope that you apply the lessons found in this audio. Because the economy needs you to be the very best leader you can be. And your customers need you to produce quality products and services. And your investors are depending on you to produce a strong return. And your nation definitely depends on you to create jobs and to contribute to economic growth. People are counting on you, and I hope you rise to the challenge. Become the strongest leader you can be, and coaching a fresh crop of leaders to someday take your place. Personally, the fact that you're listening to this already means that I admire you a lot, and I want to help you in any way you can. So let's go out now and make the world a better place.
Thank you for listening to this presentation by Bob Ramsey. If you are interested in more materials from Bob, or if you would like to contact him for any reason, he can be reached at phone number 618-406-3263 or at the email address bob@bobramseyseminars.com.